My half-sister's jealousy got worse after our father passed, and now she's trying to cut me out and then I. When my dad passed away 2 months ago, I thought the hardest part of grieving would be the absence. You know, the silence where his laugh used to be, the emptiness where his words of advice would land, the unbearable ache of not having him around for the big and small moments of life. But I was wrong. The hardest part turned out to be my half-sister, Olivia. Olivia and I had never been close. I'm 28. She's 32. Our dad, Robert, married my mom after Olivia's mom, Angela, passed away when Olivia was just a teenager. The years between us always felt like a gulf, and Olivia never made it easy to bridge that gap. She had her mom's memory to hold on to, and I had mine. It wasn't an issue until it suddenly was. Dad's passing wasn't expected. One minute he was the picture of health, gardening in the yard like always, and the next, he was gone. An aneurysm, they said. Quick, painless, and devastating. It hit me like a freight train. For Olivia, though, it seemed like she was less affected. Maybe she was just better at hiding her feelings, but I couldn't help noticing that she was far more focused on the logistics, especially the will. The day of the will reading was cold, gray, and uncomfortable in every way. It was held in the family lawyer Michael's office, a sleek, impersonal place that smelled faintly of stale coffee and paper. I'd met Michael only a handful of times growing up, usually when Dad was doing something related to his business. Olivia, on the other hand, seemed familiar with him. When Michael began reading the will, the tension in the room was palpable. Dad had been thorough, dividing his estate equally between Olivia and me. His words were clear. To my daughters, Claire and Olivia, I leave my estate and remaining assets, split evenly, as a testament to the love I hold for both of you. It was fair, at least I thought so. Olivia, though, was livid. Her face went red, and her jaw clenched so tightly I thought she might shatter a molar. This isn't right, Olivia hissed under her breath. 50-50? After everything I've done for him? I stared at her, stunned. What do you mean? What you've done for him? We're his daughters. He wanted it to be fair. She didn't respond. She just sat there, arms crossed, glaring at Michael like he'd personally insulted her. In the weeks that followed, Olivia started making moves. Subtle, sneaky things at first. She began talking to our extended family, our aunts, cousins, and even Dad's old friends, saying things like, Claire never really spent much time with Dad, you know? She only came around when it was convenient. It was infuriating. None of it was true. I'd spent time with Dad whenever I could. Sure, I didn't live in the same town like Olivia did, but I wasn't some absentee daughter. Still, her words carried weight, and I started noticing the shift. Our Aunt Nancy, who had always been kind to me, suddenly seemed distant. A cousin forgot to invite me to a family dinner. When I confronted Olivia about it, she shrugged and said, I'm just being honest, Claire. People deserve to know the truth. I wanted to scream. The estate itself wasn't anything glamorous. Dad had a modest house, a few savings accounts, and his small landscaping business that he'd poured his heart into for decades. It wasn't about the money for me. It was about the principle. Dad wanted us to share it, and I wasn't about to let Olivia steamroll me. But then things started getting weird. One afternoon, I stopped by the house to pick up a few of Dad's things. He had this collection of first edition books he loved, and I wanted to keep a few for sentimental reasons. When I arrived, I found Olivia already there. What are you doing? I asked, noticing a stack of boxes by the door. Sorting through Dad's stuff, she said casually, like it wasn't a big deal. I frowned. Shouldn't we be doing this together? She didn't even look up. I'm just getting rid of the junk. You can go through it later. It felt off, but I didn't push back too hard at the time. Later, though, when I opened one of the boxes she'd left behind, I found out she'd taken all the valuable items, antiques, rare collectibles, even Dad's watch. The box she left for me was filled with old newspapers and a broken lamp. Feeling overwhelmed, I called Michael. I didn't want to cause a family feud, but Olivia was making it impossible to grieve properly. Michael was sympathetic, but cautious. Claire, I've worked with your family for years, he said, his voice steady. I know this is difficult, but you need to protect your rights. Olivia, she's always been determined, and she knows how to get what she wants. I felt a chill at his words. What do you mean? He sighed. Let's just say she's not above using questionable methods to get ahead. Be careful. His warning stuck with me. Olivia wasn't just trying to push me aside. She was actively working to undermine me. The rail kicker came a few days later when I got a call from Paige, my best friend. She'd been at a local cafe when she overheard Olivia talking to someone. She was saying something about the business, Paige told me, about how she should be the one to run it. And then she said, Paige hesitated. What? I pressed. She said she could probably convince you to give up your share if she pushed hard enough. I sat there, stunned. Olivia wasn't just being difficult. She was planning something, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. After Paige told me what she overheard, I knew Olivia's behavior wasn't just about grief or anger. It was calculated. She wanted control of everything. Dad's house, the business, and even the family's narrative about who he cared about most. I started paying closer attention to the details, and as I did, cracks began to appear in the carefully crafted version of Olivia I'd always known. Beneath her composed, responsible exterior, there was something else, a darker, more manipulative side that Dad may have shielded me from while he was alive. Dad's landscaping business wasn't a gold mine, but it had a loyal client base and enough contracts to stay profitable. He was proud of it, and growing up, I remembered him working late nights to keep it afloat. One evening, I went to the office, a small room at the back of the house, to sort through the business files. At first, everything looked normal. There were invoices, tax records, and neatly labeled folders. But then I found a drawer that was locked. It struck me as odd because Dad was never secretive about his work. After some searching, I found the key taped under the desk. Inside were a few papers, yellowed with age, and a small notebook. The papers were shocking. Loans Dad had taken out years ago. Large sums of money, way more than I thought the business could afford. The payments had been sporadic, with some listed as settled, while others were mysteriously blank. Then there was the notebook. In Dad's handwriting, it detailed conversations with someone, Olivia. Olivia says she'll help with the loan. Spoke to Olivia again. She wants more input on the business. Olivia suggested I put her on the account. What account? I couldn't figure it out, but the way he wrote about her felt strained, like he didn't fully trust her. I called Paige as soon as I got home. She was the only person I could trust. I think Olivia was trying to take control of the business while Dad was still alive, I said, pacing my living room. Paige was quiet for a moment. Do you think that's why he took out those loans? Maybe he was trying to keep her from taking over. I don't know, I admitted, but something doesn't add up. And if she was pushing him into decisions back then, who knows what she's capable of now? The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I went to Michael, the lawyer, and asked if there were any changes to the business or estate that Olivia might have influenced. Michael hesitated before answering. Your father did add Olivia as a signatory on one of the business accounts about a year ago, but as far as I know, she didn't withdraw anything significant before his passing. That didn't comfort me. If Olivia had been trying to manipulate Dad back then, it was only a matter of time before she tried to manipulate me. Things came to a head at a family gathering a week later. It was one of those awkward, post-funeral affairs where everyone still felt obligated to check in on each other. Olivia was hosting at Dad's house, which felt wrong for so many reasons. I arrived late, partly because I didn't want to go and partly because I needed to build up the nerve to face her. When I walked in, Olivia was holding court in the living room, surrounded by relatives. She always had a hard time handling responsibility. I overheard her saying, even when Dad was alive, Claire barely showed any interest in helping out. I froze. Was she really doing this? I stepped into the room, my voice louder than I intended. That's not true, Olivia, and you know it. Everyone turned to look at me, and for a moment, I wished I could disappear. But the fire inside me wouldn't let me back down. Olivia smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Claire, I was just explaining how Dad always relied on me for the tough stuff. You were busy with your own life, which is fine. But, she trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. You mean like the loans? I snapped. Her face faltered for a split second before she recovered. What are you talking about? I found Dad's papers, Olivia. The loans, the notes about you wanting control of the business. How much of that was your idea? The room fell silent. For the first time, Olivia looked genuinely caught off guard. but she quickly shifted gears. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice low and angry. "Dad trusted me because I was here, Claire. You were always off doing your own thing, and now you want to swoop in and act like you care." I stared at her, my hands shaking. "I'm not the one who pressured him into decisions while he was sick." Her expression darkened. "Careful, Claire. You don't want to start something you can't finish." After the gathering, I couldn't stop thinking about Olivia's reaction. She hadn't denied anything outright, but she also hadn't admitted to it. And then there was David, her partner. He'd been unusually quiet the entire night, barely saying a word even when Olivia was at her most dramatic. I decided to pay him a visit. It wasn't hard to track him down. He and Olivia had been living together in a small condo a few miles from Dad's house. When I showed up, he seemed surprised to see me. "Claire," he said, stepping out into the hallway. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you," I said bluntly. "About Olivia." David hesitated, glancing over his shoulder like he didn't want her to overhear. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Please," I pressed. "I just need to understand what's going on. She's been acting like I'm the enemy, and I don't know why." He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, Olivia's complicated. She feels like she's owed something because of everything she went through after her mom died. And with your dad," he trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "With my dad, what?" I pushed. David looked like he wanted to disappear. "She was really close to him, Claire. Closer than you think. But she also had her own plans, and I think—" He stopped himself again. "You think what?" He shook his head. "I shouldn't be saying this. Just be careful." It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was enough to confirm what I already suspected. Olivia wasn't just acting out of grief. She was playing a long game, and I was in her way. The tension with Olivia wasn't letting up. It was getting worse. After my conversation with David, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than I realized. It wasn't just jealousy or grief driving Olivia. She had plans, and I was starting to think they'd been in motion long before Dad died. The problem was, I didn't have hard evidence. All I had were gut instincts, fragmented conversations, and the knowledge that Olivia had always been a little too good at getting what she wanted. But the more I looked into things, the more the pieces started falling into place. It started with a phone call from Michael, the lawyer. "Claire," he began, his voice strained. "I need to let you know that Olivia has formally contested the will." I nearly dropped my phone. "What? On what grounds?" "She's claiming you were estranged from your father," he explained carefully. "That he didn't intend for you to inherit half of the estate, and that you manipulated him into the decision while he was in declining health." My jaw dropped. Manipulated him? I wasn't even in the same town when he wrote that will. "I know," Michael said, his tone calming. "But Olivia is presenting witnesses who say otherwise. I'll handle it, but you should prepare for this to get messy." I hung up, shaking with anger. Witnesses? Who on earth could Olivia have convinced to back up these lies? A few days later, Paige called me with what she thought was a small update but turned out to be something big. "Claire, do you know a guy named Brad?" she asked. The name didn't ring a bell. "No. Why?" "Well, I was at that bar downtown, you know, the one Olivia likes, and I heard her talking to this guy. I didn't catch much, but she mentioned paying him to help her out." "What kind of help?" I asked, my stomach nodding. "I don't know," Paige admitted, "but she said something about needing evidence." Evidence. That word echoed in my head for hours. Was Olivia fabricating proof of her claims? It was one thing to spread rumors, but if she was creating false documents or paying people to lie, she wasn't just trying to win, she was trying to destroy me. Fueled by anger, I decided to confront Olivia directly. I went to Dad's house, where she was still staying, and knocked on the door. When she answered, she looked irritated to see me. "What do you want, Claire?" "I want to know why you're trying to ruin my life," I said bluntly, pushing past her into the house. She crossed her arms, leaning against the door frame. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, cut the crap, Olivia. I know you're contesting the will. I know you've been spreading lies about me to the family. And I know you've been paying people to back you up." Her face hardened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she smirked. "You think you're so smart, don't you? You think Dad actually wanted you to have all this?" "He did," I snapped. and you know it. But you can't stand the fact that he treated us equally because you always thought you deserved more. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a cold whisper. I did deserve more. I was there for him every single day. I took care of him when he was sick. I was the one who helped with the business. And you? You just showed up when it was convenient. I didn't back down. That doesn't give you the right to steal from me. She laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Steal? Claire, I'm just taking what's mine. You're the one who doesn't belong here. I left before I could say something I'd regret, but as I drove home, I realized I couldn't rely on a confrontation to solve this. Olivia wasn't going to back down, and if I wanted to protect myself, I needed to outsmart her. That night, Paige came over to help me sort through the papers I'd taken from Dad's office. It felt overwhelming. There were contracts, bank statements, and receipts scattered everywhere. Wait, Paige said, pulling out a folder. Look at this. She handed me a statement from one of Dad's accounts. It showed a withdrawal of $50,000 about a year ago. That's a lot of money, she said. Do you think this has anything to do with Olivia? I frowned, flipping through the rest of the folder. I don't know. But this is the same account Michael said Olivia was added to as a signatory. Paige's eyes widened. You think she took it? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. The next day, I called Michael and asked if he could look into the withdrawal. He agreed, but his tone was cautious. If Olivia did take the money, we'll need proof that your father didn't authorize it. I didn't have proof yet, but something told me Olivia had been dipping into that account long before Dad passed. Later that week, I got an unexpected visitor, David. He showed up at my apartment looking anxious, like he'd been wrestling with something for days. I need to talk to you, he said. About Olivia? I asked, crossing my arms. He nodded, stepping inside. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of this, but I think you should know what she's been doing. My heart pounded as I sat down across from him. Go on, he hesitated, running a hand through his hair. She's been planning this since before your dad passed. She knew about the will and started setting things up to make sure she got everything. The fake witnesses, the contesting of the will, it's all part of her plan. I stared at him, stunned. Why are you telling me this? Because I didn't sign up for this, he said, his voice filled with regret. I thought she just wanted what was fair, but this isn't fair, and I don't want any part of it anymore. He went on to tell me about the people she'd paid to back up her claims and the documents she'd forged to make it look like I'd been pressuring Dad. Do you have proof? I asked. David nodded. She kept copies of everything. I can get them for you. That night, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and betrayal. Olivia had crossed every line imaginable, and now I had the chance to fight back. With David's help, I could finally expose her for what she was. But I also knew this wasn't over yet. Olivia was smart, and she wouldn't go down without a fight. I had to be ready for whatever she threw at me next. When David handed me the folder of documents he'd taken from Olivia's condo, I felt a mix of relief and dread. Relief, because I finally had something tangible to fight her lies. Dread, because what I found inside painted a picture that was even worse than I'd imagined. The folder contained forged letters supposedly written by my dad, claiming that I was distant and only came around for money. There were fake receipts that made it look like I had mishandled funds from the business, funds I'd never even touched. And worst of all, there was a draft of a letter Olivia had written to Michael, requesting that the will be overturned entirely in her favor. She's been planning this for a long time, David said as I flipped through the papers. Did she do this all on her own? I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. David hesitated. I helped with some of it. At first, I thought it was just about her getting what she deserved. She told me you didn't care about your dad, that you didn't even want the business. I didn't realize how far she'd go until it was too late. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Why are you telling me all this now? He looked down at his hands. Because I can't live with myself if I let her ruin your life. And honestly, I'm tired of being her pawn. The next day, I went to Michael with the folder. His reaction was a mix of astonishment and anger. This is serious, Claire, he said, flipping through the forged documents. If we can prove these are fake, it's game over for Olivia. But we'll need to move carefully. What do you mean? I asked. Michael sighed. Olivia has already filed her contestation of the will. These documents help your case, but we need to present them in court as part of your defense. That means we need expert testimony to prove they're fraudulent, and we'll need to anticipate how Olivia might try to spin this. I nodded, trying to stay calm. What about the earlier drafts of the will? The ones my dad supposedly updated before this version? Michael hesitated. That's the other issue. Olivia has been claiming that your father intended to write you out of the will entirely and that this final version was coerced. If she can produce an earlier draft that supports her claims, I finished the thought for him. She could argue that the final will isn't valid. Michael nodded grimly. That night, I went back to Dad's house, determined to find something, anything, that would help me prove Olivia wrong. As I searched through his office, I thought about all the times we'd sat here together. Dad loved this space. It was his sanctuary, and he always kept it meticulously organized. It wasn't until I moved his old desk lamp that I found it, a small key taped underneath the base. My heart raced as I tried to figure out what it unlocked. I remembered the safe in Dad's closet, the one I hadn't been able to open. I ran to the bedroom and held my breath as I inserted the key. The safe clicked open, revealing a single envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from my dad, addressed to both Olivia and me. To my daughters, Claire and Olivia, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. I want you to know that I love you both equally, and my intention has always been for you to share what I've built. This estate isn't about money or power, it's about family. Please don't let greed or resentment tear you apart. Love, Dad. I stared at the letter, tears streaming down my face. This was it, proof of what Dad truly wanted. I called Paige and told her what I'd found. This changes everything, she said. But you need to be careful. If Olivia finds out you have that letter, who knows what she'll do? Paige was right, but I couldn't wait any longer. I decided to confront Olivia directly. When I showed up at the house, she was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. Claire, she said with a fake smile. What a surprise. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I know what you've been doing, Olivia. I have the forged documents. I have proof that you've been lying to everyone. Her smile faltered, but she quickly recovered. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the crap, I snapped. You've been trying to rewrite Dad's wishes because you can't handle the fact that he wanted us to share everything. But it's over, Olivia. I found the letter he wrote. The one where he made it clear that this estate was meant to bring us together, not tear us apart. For a moment, she looked genuinely shocked. Then her expression twisted into anger. You don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice rising. Dad didn't want you to have anything. He only put you in the will because he felt guilty. That's not true, and you know it. I shot back. She stepped closer, her face inches from mine. You've always been a spoiled brat, Claire. You think you're so perfect, so deserving of everything. But Dad knew who really took care of him. He knew I was the one who deserved it all. I held my ground. If that's true, why did he write the letter? Why did he leave us equal shares? Her silence was deafening. As I turned to leave, Olivia's voice stopped me. You think you've won, don't you? She said, her tone icy. But you don't know what you're dealing with. I turned back to face her. What's that supposed to mean? She smirked, a dangerous glint in her eyes. You're not as smart as you think, Claire. And you're going to regret this. Her words sent a chill down my spine, but I refused to let her see how much they rattled me. The next day, I met with Michael to prepare for the upcoming court hearing. With the forged documents, Dad's letter, and David's testimony, I felt like I finally had the upper hand. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Olivia still had something up her sleeve. As the hearing date approached, I braced myself for the fight of my life. Olivia had spent years manipulating everyone around her, but now the truth was on my side. At least, I hoped it was. The courtroom was colder than I expected, both physically and emotionally. The air carried a hushed tension, and I felt it in every nerve of my body. Olivia sat at the opposite table, poised and confident, as if she hadn't been actively working to ruin my life for months. Her lawyer, sharp, polished, and smug, whispered something to her, and she smirked in my direction. Michael leaned over to me. Stay calm, Claire. We've got the evidence. Let her dig her own grave. I nodded, gripping the letter from Dad tightly in my lap like a lifeline. From the moment the hearing began, Olivia's lawyer went on the attack. He painted a picture of me as an absentee daughter who only swooped in after Dad's death to take what she didn't deserve. Claire was never involved in her father's life, the lawyer argued. She lived out of town, rarely visited, and showed no interest in the family business. My client, Olivia, on the other hand, was there every day. She managed the business, cared for their father during his illness, and made sacrifices Claire never had to make. It's clear that Robert intended for Olivia to inherit the estate. I wanted to jump out of my seat and scream that none of it was true, but Michael placed a steady hand on my arm, silently reminding me to keep my composure. Then Olivia took the stand. She cried, actual tears, about how hard it was to take care of Dad, how she'd stayed by his side when no one else would, and how hurt she was by the idea that he'd split his estate equally with someone who didn't care. She manipulated him, Olivia said, her voice trembling. She came back into his life and convinced him to change the will. He wasn't in the right state of mind, and he would have never done that if he hadn't been pressured. Her performance was masterful. If I hadn't known the truth, even I might have believed her. Michael was ready when it was our turn. He systematically dismantled Olivia's claims, presenting the evidence David had provided and calling an expert testimony to prove the documents she'd submitted were forged. The judge's expression shifted when Michael handed over Dad's handwritten letter, the one I'd found in the safe. This letter, Michael began, was written by Robert and hidden in a private safe, where my client discovered it only recently. It explicitly states his intentions for his estate, leaving no room for ambiguity. The judge read the letter silently, her face betraying nothing, but I saw Olivia's mask of confidence slip ever so slightly. Then Michael called David to the stand. David looked nervous but determined as he took his seat. Under oath, he admitted to helping Olivia forge documents and paying people to act as false witnesses. He also confirmed that Olivia had been withdrawing money from Dad's account without his permission for over a year. She said it was her way of taking what she was owed, David said, his voice steady. But I didn't realize how far she'd go until it was too late. Olivia's face turned red, and for the first time, she looked panicked. When Olivia returned to the stand, Michael didn't hold back. Miss Olivia, he began, is it true that you withdrew $50,000 from your father's business account before his passing? Olivia squirmed. That money was for the business. I was managing it at the time. Michael raised an eyebrow. Really? Because we have financial records showing no corresponding deposits or expenses related to the business. Can you explain where that money went? She stammered, her confident demeanor cracking. It was complicated. I don't remember every detail. Michael pressed harder. And what about the witnesses you provided to contest the will? Are you aware that one of them admitted under oath to being paid by you to lie? Olivia didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. Finally, Michael presented one last piece of evidence. A series of text messages David had turned over, in which Olivia explicitly detailed her plan to discredit me and take the entire estate for herself. The courtroom was silent as the texts were read aloud. Olivia's face drained of color. After hours of testimony and deliberation, the judge delivered her ruling. Based on the evidence presented, it is clear to this court that Olivia acted in bad faith, with deliberate intent to undermine her father's wishes and defraud her sister, Claire. The contested will is upheld, and the estate will be divided equally as Robert intended. Relief flooded through me, but it was bittersweet. Yes, I'd won, but the victory felt hollow knowing how far Olivia had gone to betray me and our father's memory. The judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, Olivia's actions constitute fraud, and this court strongly recommends the initiation of criminal proceedings. Olivia's lawyer whispered frantically to her, but she looked too stunned to respond. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was immense. Olivia avoided me entirely, and I heard through the grapevine that she was facing charges for fraud and forgery. David moved out of their condo and sent me an apologetic text, saying he hoped I could find peace. As for me, I kept my share of the estate but sold Dad's business to one of his trusted employees. It wasn't about the money. It never was. It was about protecting Dad's legacy and standing up for what was right. Paige stayed by my side through it all, reminding me that family isn't always about blood. It's about the people who truly support you. One day, While sorting through the last of Dad's belongings, I found a second note tucked inside one of his favorite books. Claire, if you're reading this, I hope you know how proud I am of you. Life isn't always fair, but you've always had a strong sense of what's right, and I know you'll carry that with you no matter what. Take care of yourself, and remember that I love you. Dad. I sat there for a long time, holding the letter close. Dad was right. Life isn't fair, but at least now, I could move forward knowing I'd done everything I could to honor his memory.